This morning, we're getting a fresh new look at an old classic. In 1889, Vincent Van Gogh checked himself into a psychiatric hospital in southern France. And it was there he completed some of his most notable works. That includes irises. This masterpiece has been studied by artists and historians for more than a century. But now, researchers are using the latest technology to give us a look at the painting that's never been seen before. Danya Bacchus has this story.
Tucked within the modern and mighty architecture of Los Angeles' most noteworthy art museum, the Getty Center, is a colorful and quaint 135-year-old painting hung on the wall of a meticulously lit one-room exhibition.
This is one of the first paintings he created from a particular period in that short lifetime of his. I think for the Getty to acquire a painting of that stature was extraordinary.
One of Debbie Orman's interests when she joined the Getty as conservator 10 years ago was to study in depth the museum's most famous work of art, irises painted by Van Gogh.
It's a perfect subject for the types of work that Debbie and I do every day at the institution.
Catherine Patterson's scientific expertise in this kind of project would help unearth what can't be seen with the naked eye.
What that means on both the micro scale of the materials and the actual chemical elements that are in there, all the way up to the macro scale.
But there was a key challenge preventing such a project from happening. The painting's popularity meant it was always on display. But in one day, that all changed.
This painting never comes off the wall for the most part, but the pandemic gave you guys the opportunity to take it down.
Absolutely.
And look closely at it.
Yes, the museum closed to the public during the pandemic, and it really was the opportunity to study the painting really closely, uninterrupted.
Discovering this thin silver lining in a sea of the pandemic's darkness was the beginning of a multi-layered investigation to answer a century-old question.
So we wanted to know about color. We wanted to know about how materials were changing over time. The first step to understanding that is to know what the materials are.
Scholars have believed for years that the blue irises we see today were originally painted by Van Gogh in a different color, based on these letters he wrote in 1889 describing them to his family.
So one of the main questions we wanted to answer was, were these petals actually violet?
And there's such a deep science that goes into that. I mean, you're in a lab.
Absolutely.
This isn't something that you're just looking at with your eye and saying, oh, we can tell that it's changed.
We have techniques to focus on all of that material identification. And once we know what something is, we can make educated guesses about how it's changed over time, if it has.
The revelation of the painting's true violet color occurred one day in the lab when Orman, Patterson, and their colleague were examining the painting under the microscope, looking beyond the surface, inside of the microscopic cracks.
But it was that moment where we were just like, oh my God, this is actually what we've been looking for. And it was kind of emotional, if I have to admit, because of the time that was in it. You know, it was a pandemic, there was lockdown, there's a lot of suffering going on, and again, it sort of brought the whole feeling of Van Gogh and what everyone was going through at the time.
I remember thinking, this is the first time in 130 years we've had the extraordinary privilege to know what Van Gogh actually meant us to see.
Another discovery in the paint led them to experience what Van Gogh actually did see in the garden of the psychiatric hospital in France where he painted irises.
We came across a strange-looking object stuck in the paint, and it looked like organic matter, like maybe some sort of plant or maybe an insect, and we really weren't sure.
During a visit to the Saint Paul de Massol Hospital, among the violet irises of the botanical meadow, which has hardly changed since Van Gogh was a patient, was the answer.
Surprisingly, found all over the garden on the floor, tiny little pollen cones, which matched exactly the pollen cone that we have in the painting, so stuck in the paint.
These moments were the catalyst for an exhibition titled Ultraviolet, New Light on Van Gogh's Irises, that opened at the Getty in early October. The exhibit showcases the team's investigation and discoveries, In a new approach, they use 3D imaging to reconstruct the painting to appear, in their best estimation, how Van Gogh originally painted it.
The science is done, and then they come to you, and do they say, we need you to recreate a Van Gogh?
Something like that. They said, we have all of this research, you know, can we make this into a visual image and maybe something that we can show for the exhibit?
Johanna Herrera is a leading imaging specialist at the Getty. She took the data and used a process called photogrammetry, a technique that used high-res photographs of irises to create a 3D model.
What was it like trying to make sure that you had the right color?
That took a lot of iterations. It was about 6 months worth of meetings and changes and refinements that had to be done so that all of these gradations of purple could be captured accurately.
A new take on one of the Getty's most iconic paintings, and the perfect illustration of what happens at the intersection of art and science.
The work that Debbie and I do together is as sort of CSI art. What we do when we work together is to try to understand what's happened to it, who's been involved in its story, and one of the real privileges we have is to have the time and access to understand it at that very deep, very intimate level.
That it's much, much more than just a beautiful picture.
For CBS Saturday Morning, Danya Bacchus, Los Angeles.
You've got artistry, technology, science, archaeology, and real heart in just that painting and that story.
I
Great, Danya.
love the way they're able to use technology to show us something we wouldn't have known. It doesn't destroy that piece, it just makes it more beautiful and gives us even more story to love about it.